In the book Things Fall Apart, the author Achebe uses the European missionaries that come in and try to convert the African tribe. He uses them as an example of the real-life Europeans who came in to colonize the Igbo land, African clan people. And this right here, I have an example of another tribe. This is a made-up African tribe I made up. And it's going to be an example of what the European colonization and what the point Achebe wanted to make, what it had to do, what it felt like to the Africans whose land was being colonized. So this is an African tribe, and it's a small village. And this African tribe likes to live very peacefully. They live in a very tiny village. And this particular African tribe, they believe heavily in a nature god. And they believe in coexisting with the animals. The animals should live with them. Live with them in their houses and on their land. No separate living quarters, no fences or anything. They lived in very small houses in a tiny cluster. Their houses had very minimal furniture. They lived very simply. They had one house of worship, a church. They also used for meeting places. That's where they had their town meetings, anything like that. They had a very modest farm with just enough food to feed themselves and their animals. They grew their own wheat and their own beets and potatoes and carrots. Very, very small farm. Few animals. They also had a means of worshiping their nature god. And instead of human sacrifice, it was a form of human sacrifice. For 1 week, every year, a person and an animal had to coexist living in this close-in area with an animal. For a whole week, this person had to do this, and that's how they paid respects to their god, to the nature god that they believed in. Well, when Europeans decided they wanted to come into this African tribe, they didn't like any of this. They thought it was stupid and inhumane the way a person had to live with an animal for a week. Much like the Europeans that came to the Igbo land tribe didn't believe in their slave trade and tried to replace it with the palm oil industry. So when the Europeans came, they decided they didn't like the way any of this was, and so they slowly got rid of things. The Europeans destroyed the Africans' land. They destroyed their means of religion, killed their people. They said that the god they believed in, the nature god, wasn't real, and told them they had to stop worshiping it, and got rid of their worship place. Europeans wanted to completely get rid of their way of life because it wasn't what they thought it should be. So soon after this land was destroyed, there was no more land, no more of this African tribe. Soon after, there was the Europeans' world. So replaced was the tiny village with their modest farm and coexisting with animals. Soon it was replaced by a thriving metropolis. They had more than one meeting place. Now they had an entire courthouse, because that's what the Europeans thought that this tribe should have. So they had large buildings. They also believed that the African tribe, instead of, just like in real life, the way Achebe was trying to draw attention to the intolerance towards and the misunderstanding of the slave trade that the Igbo land tribe had, and they replaced it with the palm oil trade. In this instance, the African tribe that made a person coexist with an animal for an entire week, the Europeans didn't believe in that, and so they replaced it with the trade of hay and melons. The Europeans decided that they needed a library and a formal hospital and a school, and no more were the little tiny houses with minimal furniture. They now had large mansions, fireplaces, and all this furniture, and giant table, even if there were only 2 people in the house. They had many stories to the houses, giant bedrooms that were bigger than the Africans' houses before, singular bedrooms that were bigger. They spread out, the Africans. They were no longer just in a tiny cluster. There were roads. The European brand was everywhere. Fancy houses replaced the tiny houses. And no longer did they coexist with the animals either. Since the Europeans decided that that wasn't the way they thought they should live, they exploited their ability with animals, and they fenced off all the animals into their separate cages, their separate fences. They didn't live with the people. They were all separate. And instead of just providing for themselves, now they provided for the other European colonies. No more little tiny farms, now they farmed enough to sell and make a profit. Because that's what the Europeans thought was better. When they came in, they thought that their land was superior, their idea, their culture was superior to that of the Africans. So they decided